Hey fellow guitarists, excitingly in this video we're going to be talking about the topic of modes. If you've ever wondered how to play modes on guitar or what they are, we're going to be going through that today. Hopefully by the end of the video you'll completely understand modes and how to apply them on the guitar. There's going to be lots of practical exercises and scale charts you can download with this lesson. First off, what are modes? Modes are quite simply different ways of playing a scale depending on the note you start on. So with the major scale there's 7 notes, that means there's 7 different modes. So in the key of C, C major scale, we have C, D, E, F, G, A and B. Then we're back to the octave. We can play modes by starting on a different note in the scale and making that the home or the root note. So you may have seen in my diagrams where you've got an R, that means root. That's the home of the scale, chord or arpeggio. That's where all the other notes relate back to. For instance, if we start on the C and continue up the scale to the next C, an octave higher, that's known as Ionian mode. Now if we play the same scale but start from the D and end on the next D an octave higher, that is called D Dorian. Exactly the same notes in terms of the musical alphabet. And so on and so forth. You'd start on the E, F, G, A and B, and there's 7 different modes with 7 different names. Here's a quick rundown of the 7 modes of the major scale. The first mode is called C Ionian, which is basically the major scale, and it goes like this. The second mode is D Dorian, which is slightly jazzy and bluesy. Mode 3 is called E Phrygian, and this is an exotic and Spanish sounding mode. Mode 4 is called Lydian. This is very dreamy and uplifting. Mode 5 is called G Mixolydian. This is very bluesy and funky sounding. Mode number 6 is called A Aeolian, also known as relative minor, and this is kind of sad and reflective in sound. And the final 7th mode is called B Locrian, and this sounds tense and unresolved. Okay, so there's some key things for me to point out before we move on. So with each of those 7 modes I just played, they all contained the same notes. Their parent scale is C major. Now, a really important thing you need to do is spend some time memorizing the names of these modes. I can't even explain how important it is if you really are serious about playing guitar and learning new exotic scales, because if you learn all of these names for the major scale modes, all of the other ones from harmonic minor and melodic minor will be so much easier because they're just slight variations of all the modes of the major scale. Here are some effective strategies to remember mode names and their orders. First of all, you can use mnemonics. So for example, I've got a really fun one which is quite ironic, but that's part of the charm. I don't particularly like modes a lot. So each of the first letters from this phrase matches the mode name. Or make your own funny sentence that's easy to remember. Second of all, you can try relating their modes to the emotional feel that they give. So for example, the Ionian mode is bright and happy. Dorian is kind of bluesy and jazzy. Phrygian sounds exotic and kind of Spanish sounding. Lydian is kind of a dreamy, floaty feel. Mixolydian has a real blues feel to it. Aeolian sounds dark and sad, and Locrian just sounds very tense. It's the most tense mode of the major scale. The third way to memorize these mode names and the order is to quite simply practice writing them out. I think this is where it clicked for me. You're really thinking about how you spell it, and make sure you say it as you're writing them out. You can do it in different keys. Hopefully by the end of this video, you'll understand how you can create modes in all the 12 different keys. So you can practice that. So for example, in the key of G major, you do G Ionian, you do A Dorian, B Phrygian, and so on and so forth. The fourth way of reinforcing these modes is actually saying them as you're practicing them. So I'm going to give you some exercises later and shapes for you to learn for each of the modes. Make sure you say them before you play them. So for example, C Ionian, C Dorian, C Phrygian, C Lydian, C Mixolydian, C Aeolian, C Locrian. Hearing the sound and saying them at the same time really helps them stick. Number 5, which is a really effective way, which we use at school, is use flashcards. For example, you could do mode names on one side and then characteristics on the other. It's up to you. You can have some fun with that. And finally, another way you can do it is relate them to the positions on the guitar. So for example, I'm going to be showing you 3-note per string shapes. There's going to be 7 shapes because there's 7 notes in the scale. So the first shape would look like this. This would be shape 1 for C major. And then you'd say Ionian mode, that's bright and exciting. Then we'd have shape number 2, which starts on the D. And that would be D Dorian. And what you're doing here is you're building your association with shapes, sounds, and by saying it as well, you're getting all these connections in one. Now, it will take some time to learn these names of the modes and their sounds. Don't worry too much about that. In terms of the naming, it actually originates from ancient Greek music theory. So that's why you may not have heard of this kind of wording in your language if you're British like me or from another English-speaking country. Okay, so before we move on to different exercises and shapes for you to learn, let me make sure you guys truly understand how modes are created. I'm going to try and explain this in a few different ways. I understand how complex modes can sound to a beginner, and I want to try and portray them in a lot of different ways so it clicks, because when it clicks, it's amazing. And these modes can be used so much in your playing to create some awesome music. Now let's try a different point of view, and I'm going to show you some diagrams of how to visualize the major scale modes. So we're going to do this in the key of C. So on one string from the 3rd fret of the A string, it would look like this. And now if I write this out on the diagram, so these are single string diagrams. Imagine this is the A string starting on the 3rd fret here. So we've first got C, D, E, F, G, A, B, and then we're back to C again, an octave higher. So that's exactly what I just played. If you don't know this interval spacing, make sure you pause the video now and learn this inside out. That's the major scale. That's the pattern that works on any string. So you could change the key. This is the key of C. You could do the same pattern in the key of G, a string lower, and that would be G major scale. So whatever your first note, your root note is, that's going to be the major scale. Okay, so that's the first mode, also known as Ionian, which is basically the major scale. Let me get rid of those underlines. So there we have C major scale or C Ionian mode. Maybe I'll write mode in there just to make it clear. Now to make the second mode of Dorian, we're going to be taking all of the same notes, but this time we're not going to be starting from C, we're starting from D, and that's our home note. So what you'll notice is if you compare these two one-string diagrams side by side, all of the interval spacings are exactly the same because they're all the same notes. All we're doing is starting from this D. So this would look like this. And there we have D Dorian mode. Now, to create the third mode of the major scale, we're going to take the third degree of the scale, which is E, and this is going to create E Phrygian. So once again, it's all the same notes as C major, but starting from the E note. There we go. And this is known as Phrygian. Got to make sure I don't spell that wrong. And there we have the third mode, which is Phrygian mode. Oh, I forgot to put mode in there. Let's put that in there for you guys. You can download all of these PDFs. They come with this lesson. Next up, we've got the fourth mode, which is called Lydian. And you guessed it, we're just going to be starting from the F note, which is the fourth degree of C major scale. And when I say degree, it just means there's 7 notes in the scale. The first is called the first degree, second is second degree, third is third, and so on. So we're taking the fourth degree or fourth note in the scale and now making that the root or the home. And then this creates our F Lydian scale or mode. Oh, that's something very important as well. Just to stop right here. You can say Lydian mode or Lydian scale. The difference is that you're aware that Lydian is a mode or comes from the major scale. It's the fourth mode, but you can just say I'm playing Lydian scale. It is a scale in its own right, and we'll discuss that a bit further later on. So this is called Lydian mode. There we go. And then we've got, I'm just going to write these all out. So mixer Lydian. This is the test. What's the next one? It is Aeolian. I've forgotten to write modes here. Let's get some consistency going. And while I'm writing this out, what is the 7th mode? That's correct. I heard you say Locrian, right? It's a weird sounding one. So this is the most tense one. But right, let me just go through these quickly. So mixer Lydian takes the 5th degree. So if we go back to our top one, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we're going from the G and we're going to create the same scale. It's the same pattern, but we're just starting from the G note. And that creates G mixed Lydian mode. Next up, we've got the 6th mode, which starts from the 6th degree of the major scale, the parent mode, and that is going to be A, also known as relative minor or the natural minor scale. Let me write that in brackets here. So this is natural minor scale. Now, if you've been playing guitar for a while, you would have probably heard of relative minor and major. So A minor and C major share the same notes. This is exactly the same thing, and this makes sense. So if you've heard of Stairway to Heaven, I'm assuming most of us have, the solo in that is in the key of A minor. It uses the A minor pentatonic shape 1. The A minor pentatonic is derived from natural minor. It can also be taken from 2 other modes from the major scale, but we'll talk about that later. So you can actually use shape 1 of your minor pentatonic 3 different places when playing over 1 chord, which I never even knew about till a few years ago and when I got really into music theory, but we'll talk about that a bit later. Okay, so basically this is natural minor, and this will actually bring up a really good point which I never thought of. Surely, because everything is parented to the major scale, there is technically no such thing as a minor scale in terms of it's just the major scale and then its modes. So It's a bit of a brain teaser. As you play more guitar and get more into your journey of playing guitar, you'll hear all these different theories and things, but there's so many different ways to look at modes, and we'll try and go through them all in this video. Okay, so there is Aeolian mode. We're just starting from the 6th degree of C major. Last but not least, we are taking the 7th note and creating Locrian mode. So this is from the 7th degree, so B Locrian. And we're just building the major scale. So right next to it, BC, there's the major scale being built again. Here we go. Until we reach B. Okay, so there is our 7 modes on single strings. Notice all of these different scales have the same notes in terms of C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C. The only thing that's changing is the place we start the scale from. Okay, so that's our 7 modes. You may be thinking, well, Carl, how do these sound different? They all share exactly the same notes. Well, this all comes down to the interval spacing between the first note and the rest of the notes in the scale. If we now look at these 7 modes, I've taken away all of the musical alphabet. We can analyze the distance between the first note, the second note, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, and 7th. And what we'll discover is there's a different formula for every single one of these modes or scales, which is what makes them different. And that's how we find out whether a major chord or a minor chord is played with these scales or modes. So if we go to our first mode and we make this the root note or the home, we're seeing this in the key of C, but you could use this pattern as discussed earlier anywhere. So with regards to the root, the second note is a major second away, and then from the root to the 3rd note is a major 3rd, from the root to the 4th note is a perfect 4th, from the root to the 5th is a perfect 5th, root to the 6th is a major 6th, and then root to the 7th is a major 7th. Now what this tells us is a lot of things about the first mode, Ionian mode, which we all know and love. First of all, it creates a major triad. So within any scale, if you want to harmonize to the 5th degree, where you get major, minor, augmented, or diminished triads, what you do is you take the root, skip a note, so we get rid of the major second, skip a note, get rid of the perfect 4th. We've got a root, major 3rd, perfect 5th. The first mode, Ionian mode, works over a major chord. So if I play a C major chord like this and then play the pattern, it works beautifully. Now let me put in the rest of those notes. You could continue to harmonize the scale up to the 7th degree. So from the 5th you'd skip the major 6th and then get the 7th. So you get a root, a major 3rd, perfect 5th and major 7th, and that creates a major 7 chord like I played earlier in this lesson. So let's do that again. We can play a C major 7. This is considered to be the A shape for C major 7, and then once again in the key of C, there's our root on the 3rd fret. We just play C Ionian mode. And you could also play lots of extensions if you want, but I won't go into that in this video. So essentially, the Ionian mode works over major chords or major 7 chords. If you harmonized it to the 9th degree, it works over major 9s, because then we'd be taking the 2nd. And if you did it to the 11th degree, we've got a perfect 4th, so that would be a major 11 chord. We've got a major 6, so to the 13th degree, that would be a major 13. So all of these chords work with the Ionian mode, which we should know anyway if we know about the major scale. Now this is when it gets a bit exciting and different. If we take the Dorian mode, which we know is in the key of D for this, but we analyze these notes, so the spacing between the root and the other notes, we've got a major 2nd, which makes sense. It's the same as this one. So when we're judging intervals, we're doing it by frets. So to get a major second interval, we're going up 2 frets, the same as with the major scale. But then notice here we've got a minor third or flat 3. It makes sense because look, this third up here is actually a fret higher. It would be down there to be a minor third. Now this lesson isn't about intervals, but I highly recommend you learn your intervals if you don't know what they are, because this is what I'm essentially doing here, as I'm judging the root to the perfect fourth for the 4th note. Then the 5th note is a perfect 5th, the 6th note is a major 6th, but the 7th note is a minor 7. So judging all of these notes and treating them as their own scale, we have a minor triad. If we harmonize it to the 5th degree, we've got a root, flat 3 and 5. And then to the 7th degree, we've got a minor 7. So if we played D minor 7 like this, we could still just play the C major scale just from the D, the 2nd note, and you're creating D Dorian. And the way I'm practicing now I'm actually holding notes with a pedal. These pedals are quite expensive. I will, with this lesson pack, give you the drone notes that you can play over and some drone chords that you can practice over. So what you could do is grab the minor chord drone for any key you want. Now this interval spacing will be the same. So ignore the fact that this now is in the key of D. If you want to play the Dorian mode, you want to do this spacing. So in terms of the root note and the 2nd note are 2 frets apart. Then the minor third is 1 fret away. And the perfect 4th is 2. That is the same anywhere. If I moved it, the root note to the G string down here, we'd play the same pattern. And that would mean that for G Dorian, the parent scale must be 2 frets down. So F major is the same as G Dorian, but I'm going a bit off topic here. So that's how you can practice these modes on one string. Now let's move on to Phrygian and make that the root. Now this is a lot different again. Notice the minor 2nd here. So the 2nd is only 1 fret away from the root, which has not happened yet in the Ionian mode or Dorian. So we've already got something different. We've got a minor 3rd, a perfect 4th, a perfect 5th. We've got something different here, a minor 6th. So already we can see that the Dorian mode and Phrygian mode, if we harmonize it to the 5th degree, so we go 1 note, the root, skip a note, minor 3rd, skip a note, we've got a perfect 5th. We've got a minor triad. So the Dorian mode and the Phrygian mode work well over minor chords or minor 7 chords, because we have the 7th when we do tertian harmony. We're stacking thirds essentially. So let me just do it quickly, just so if you don't understand. So from the root, we want to get rid of the 2nd. From the 3rd, skip 1, get rid of the perfect 4th. So up to the 5th degree, we have a minor triad, a root, flat 3, 5. From the 5th to the minor 7th, we want to skip that. If we harmonize the Phrygian mode to the 7th degree, it works over either a minor chord or a minor 7. So if I play E minor 7, I know that C major scale works. If I play it from the 3rd note, I'm creating E Phrygian. Isn't that crazy how exotic that sounds? And it's exactly the same notes as C major, but because we've played a different chord underneath, it's completely changed the vibe. I also want to make it clear, you don't necessarily have to play the chord underneath. It depends on where you're really focusing the root note. If I just played an E drone note, you could still get the Phrygian vibe. So I'm thinking C major just from the 3rd note here. There's the C, C major. But there's home, there's our root. Now this is something crazy. We know that Dorian and Phrygian work over minor chords. Let's forget about parent scales and let's just play these patterns over the same chord. But we're going to move the root note for both of these scale shapes on one string to the D. I'm going to play a D minor 7 chord. I'm going to play the Dorian shape. And it works beautifully. I'm going to now take the Phrygian shape because I know this works over minor chords. And they both work. So what's happened here is by analysing just 3 of these modes from the major scale is we've created 3 new formulas. These all have parent scales. If we actually analysed that Phrygian scale when I've moved it to the key of D, technically if we go down to the B flat, that's the home for that one. But we're treating them as individual scales rather than seeing them as part of the major scale. Anyway, let's move on to Lydian and analyse that. So we're making that the root. And what you'll notice is we've got a brand new formula. We've got a root, major second, major third, same as the major scale so far, but we have one difference. The 4 is augmented or sharp 4. So whenever you sharpen the 4th or 5th, it's known as augmented 4th or sharp 4 and sharp 5. Then we've got a perfect 5th, major 6th, major 7th. And hopefully you'll understand that from analysing these to the 5th degree, we've got a root, major 3rd, perfect 5th. Lydian works over a major chord up to the 7th degree, a major 7. Now this is something cool because now we know over major chords we don't have to always play the major scale. We can actually play Lydian mode. And I tell you what, this sharp 4 brings a whole new sound to the major scale. In terms of it's not the major scale, it's Lydian, it's floaty, it's beautiful. So let me give an example. So sticking to C, so we've got C, D, E, F. If we play F major 7 and then I play C major scale but from the 5th degree, we will get C Lydian, F Lydian, sorry. And you can feel that even though I went down to the C there, it wants to resolve to the F. And I'm using all the same notes as C major, but my home is now F. There's that sharp 4. I could play the major scale instead, so I'm going to play F major scale and listen to the difference. F Lydian. F major. I think Lydian is a better scale than the major scale. It's so much more exciting. If you're playing over a major chord, choose Lydian. Isn't that cool? Just by changing one note, just move up your perfect 4th intervals up 1 fret. Anyway, so the Lydian mode is a major mode. It works over major chords, it works over major 7 chords. Next up, we've got the mixed Lydian mode, which is known to be bluesy, and this will make sense because we have a root, major 2nd, major 3rd, perfect 4th, perfect 5th, major 6th, the same as the major scale, but we've got a minor 7th. So if we analyse this, we've got a major chord up to the 5th degree, then we've got a dominant chord when taking it up to the 7th degree. So Mixolydian works over a dominant chord or a major chord. So if I played G dominant, which is the 5th note in the major scale, and just played C major, but starting from that G note, it would sound like this. It's that minor 7th that gives it the blues feel. So that is the Mixolydian mode. And we have now got 3 major modes. We know that on the 5th degree of the major scale, it's not a major 7th chord. So if you've got a dominant chord, you want to play Mixolydian mode rather than Lydian or Ionian. So we've got 2 minor modes and technically 3 major modes so far. Now, we already know this is going to be minor, but let me prove it. If we put the root on the A, in terms of this being from the parent scale C, we've got a root, major 2nd, minor 3rd, perfect 4th, perfect 5th, minor 6th, and minor 7. And there we go. If we harmonise the 5th degree, we've got a minor triad to the 7th, a minor 7. So what this means is we can play a minor 7 chord. I'm going to do it down here just so it sounds better. And then from the 6th degree, if we just play C major, we get the sound of Aeolian mode. And you can hear it doesn't want to resolve to that C, it wants to go down to the A. But we're still using all of the notes of C major, but now the focus is on the A and all the notes around it relate back to that A. So it's crazy, all the same notes, but a different formula, just by starting from a different note in the scale. Finally, we have Locrian. Let's analyze this. It'll make sense why this is quite nasty. It's got a flat 2nd in there like the Phrygian mode. We've got a minor 3rd, a perfect 4th, but we've got a flat 5. So already we've got a brand new triad here. If we go from the root, skip 1, get rid of that 2nd, we've got a minor 3rd, skip 1, get rid of the perfect 4th, we've got a diminished triad. So in the major scale, in terms of harmonizing the chords, now this is how you find out all of the harmonized chords in the major scale. So the 1 chord is major. That makes sense from analysing the first mode. The 2 chord Dorian is minor. The 3 is minor. Makes sense. 4 is major. 5 is major. 6 is minor. 7 is diminished. Now, knowing all this from our modes, we can harmonise this single scale on 1 string with chords. Now, if you know your A shapes from the cage system, we can play our 3 different minor, major and diminished shapes. So we've got C major. Then we've got D minor, E minor, F major, G major, A minor. We've got B flat diminished. That's a beast to play that one. And then back to C. And we've worked out how to harmonise the whole scale using the modes and analysing all of their intervals. This is how it's created. So if you have a chord progression, let's say, that goes 1, 4, 5, you must have heard this so many times. So it goes C, F, and G. Now what we could do is we could play modally in terms of thinking about these chords. So for the 1 chord, I'll hold that down. On 1 string, we could play the Ionian mode. Then for the 4 chord, we could play F Lydian, because we know the 4th mode, if this is using the 4th chord from a harmonized scale, we could play Lydian. And then for the 5 chord, we could of course play Mixolydian. Now, this brings up a bit of a obvious thing, might not be obvious actually, that surely you could just play C major scale over all these chords and it works. Yes, 100%. Let me just prove that as well. So I've got a 1, 4, 5 there. I could just play C major over this whole progression and it works. Here we go. So you could just say, technically, over those 4 chords, even though I just played the same pattern going up and down the C major scale, you could say that I implied Ionian, Lydian and mixed Lydian without even thinking about it. Now here's a different approach where I am thinking a bit more that when I'm moving to the F, I've got the option of really targeting that sharp 4. I'm more thinking about the intervals rather than I'm just playing C major. So I know with F, my sharp 4 is always here. And then for my mixolydian, my flat 7, I want to aim for that. So for G, in the key of G, it'd be here instead of a major. So I'm targeting those notes. Check this out. Now hopefully you're hearing that sounds a little more musical now. I'm not just thinking about C major, I'm aware that each of the chords have their own sounds, and if I target the specific intervals, I get that flavour of each of the modes. Now for example, with that F major chord, I'm really targeting the sharp 4. So with all my Fs on the fretboard, I'm really looking for these. So and that's when you really start to get those modal sounds. I highly recommend checking out the app Solo by David Beebe and Tom Quayle, both phenomenal players. I'm not endorsed by them at all, but it is one of the best resources out there if you're looking to learn your intervals in regards to all of the notes on the fretboard. It's a bit of a game changer in terms of knowing where you are all the time. But anyway, going off topic, let's get back to the Locrian mode and analyze that quickly. I know we got to the 5th degree. To the 7th degree, we've got a -7 flat 5. So if we played B -7 flat 5 up here, and then we just played the C major scale, but from the B, you can hear that even though the C is right next door on the 15th fret, it wants to go back to the B there because that's the home. So there we go. This is something that's massively important if you don't know already. And this is how you can write songs anyway. So if you don't know about this, this lesson has doubled up as a harmonization course in terms of if you want to write a 1-4-5 progression in the key of C, you know the 1 chord is C major, the 4 chord is F major, the 5 chord is going to be G major. You could do a 2-5-1, so you know the 2 chord or the second mode is D Dorian in the key of C, then the 5 chord is G major, and then the 1 chord is C major. Songwriting, then over that 2 chord you play Dorian. Over that 5 chord you play mixolydian. You could, as I say, just play C major over this and it works, but you're not really targeting things and you'll find that it just sounds really bland, like we heard at the beginning, like you're going up and down a scale. Whereas if you target, that's exactly the same notes as C major, but I'm targeting D Dorian. Same with E Phrygian. Even though it's the same notes, you're hearing it's part of a different mode or different scale. So that essentially is one way of me explaining how modes work. That's what made it work for me in terms of visualizing it on one string and then realizing that's how you harmonize chords. Now, hopefully you're seeing how this works. You can do this with harmonic minor. So you take that scale and then you start on each of the 7 degrees of that and you get 7 modes of harmonic minor. Very exciting. You can do this with melodic minor, double harmonic major. All of these scales have another 7 modes to learn, another 7 scales. So with the major scale, that's 7 different scales, melodic minor 7, harmonic minor 7, double harmonic major, that's another 7. But the main ones are the major scale, harmonic minor and melodic minor. And to be honest, the majority of your career, you'll be playing the major scale. If you're playing blues, that just uses mixolydian and then the minor pentatonic and blues scale forced over the top of that 5 chord. Now blues is very interesting. So if you look at a dominant blues progression, so a 1-4-5, it is actually non-diatonic. So there's actually 3 dominant chords and they have 3 different parent scales. So the first chord, so let's say we're doing a blues in the key of A, the 1 chord would be A dominant 7, then the 4 chord would be D dominant 7, and the 5 would be E dominant 7. So these all have different scales that you play over them in terms of over the A chord, theoretically, you want to play A mixolydian, which would be the, technically would be actually D major, because the 5th note of D major is A mixolydian. With the 4 chord, D dominant 7, the home or parent scale is actually G. So we've got G, A, B, C, D. And then finally for the 5 chord, E7, E dominant 7, the parent scale is actually A major. So that means when you're playing over a dominant blues, you technically can't just play the same scale over all 4 chords. There's actually 3 different modes being played. Well, it's the same mode, but it's moving to different keys. So over the 1 chord, you've got A mixolydian. Then over the 4 chord, you've got D mixolydian. Over the 5 chord, you guessed it, E mixolydian. Then back to the 1. Now let me give you an example of me playing a 1-4-5 12-bar blues in the key of A. So we've got an A7, D7 and E7. Over the top of these, I'm going to be following each of the chords. So for the A7, I'm going to be playing A mixolydian, which could be seen as D major. And then for the D chord, a D7, I'm going to be playing D mixolydian, which could be seen as G major. Then for the 5 chord, I'm going to be playing E mixolydian, which is basically A major. Now you'll hear a lot of players will completely ignore the fact that you're supposed to play this, not supposed to, but theoretically that's what you're supposed to play over a dominant 12-bar blues. But what blues players will do is they will mix and match the major and minor pentatonic, which makes sense because a lot of the notes are from the corresponding scale. So for example, in front of me here is A minor pentatonic. We've got some things in common with the A7. We've got the root, the perfect 4th, perfect 5th, the minor 7th. The one thing that's out is the minor 3rd, so that adds tension over that chord. But if we then move that and make it major, that means we can play technically our major pentatonic over it as well, which has a major 3rd, and you can kind of go between them, and you can add that blues note in there, that flat 5 for tension. This diagram's looking a bit confusing now, but this is why you can mix and match your minor and major pentatonics over a 1-4-5. But you are kind of forcing one scale over 3 different chords. So you could actually be quite clever or come across as very sophisticated when you're playing your next 12-bar blues and try and aim with playing mixolydian for each of the individual chords. So let me give you an example. The first time round, maybe I'll just target everything mixolydian and then the second time I'll do what most blues players do and just play the minor pentatonic, A minor pentatonic, A minor blues mixed in with some A major pentatonic and A major blues. Let's give it a go and see what happens. Now mix and match both. Something like that, hours of fun. And once you start to realize that the blues is not diatonic in terms of one scale doesn't really work over all the chords, then it opens up a whole new world of exploring different modes that work over these chords. So as we discussed, the minor and major pentatonic still work over each of the chords, but there is other things you can try out. So for example, the fifth mode of harmonic minor is Phrygian dominant. That works over dominant chords. You've got Mixolydian flat 6 from melodic minor, works over that chord. You've got the altered scale, which is the seventh mode of melodic minor and adds loads of tension to some of your, well, can add tension to your dominant chord and make it into an altered chord where you got flat nines and other alterations of your dominant chords. It's very exciting. So that's a good example of where modes exist where they're not diatonic. Okay, so hopefully that was super clear explaining modes on one string. Our next step is to build the major scale all over the fretboard, and then what we're going to do is we're going to split it up into 3 note per string shapes. So essentially we're going to do this in the key of G, and what 3 note per string means, or 3 MPS, means what it says in the tin. You're having 3 notes from the scale on each string. So for example, we're going to be doing G major scale. So we're going to have G, A, B, C, D, E, F sharp and G. And then we're just going to keep building the scale. So 1 octave, 2 octaves, and then keep following the scale all the way up until we run out frets. And it looks a little something like this in the key of G. So here, let me write it all out for you. So notice there's 3 notes on a string. And let me put all of the notes on there first, just so you can see. So we're just essentially building, let me put the root notes in red there just to make it clear. So we're building the G major scale on one string like this. So from the G on the 3rd fret of the low E string. Now essentially what we're doing here, you'll see the 7 modes up here and the corresponding 3 note per string shapes. All these 7 shapes are doing is connecting together. So this Ionian shape, even though I haven't put the notes there, I've just got the intervals. This is starting from the 3rd fret, which is G. Then this Dorian one is just starting from the 5th fret, which is A. This Phrygian one is from the B. And then the Lydian one is going to be from the C here. And the Mixolydian one's going to be from the D. And then the Aeolian one's from E. And Locrian's going to be from the F sharp. So all they're doing is starting from the 7 degrees of G major scale. And we're just building all of these up. Technically, you could see these as shapes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. Now, if you disregarded the root note being the start of each of these notes, it wouldn't be these different modes. It would just be 7 3-note per string shapes for G major. You could just play all of these shapes up and down. There's shape 1. Then from the A is shape 2. That's just G major again, but you're playing it from the 2nd note. Then from the B would be Phrygian. Or it's just going to be G major scale from the 3rd note, so on and so forth. So you build all of these notes connecting together. Now, when you get the modal sound is when we do the chords with these each corresponding shapes. So what I want you to practice with these 7 shapes, and there will be guitar tabs you can download with this. So don't worry too much about the fingerings and things. That will all be in the tabs. So when you see that little number next to the tabs or the music notation, that means use, let's say on the 3rd fret, use your 1st finger, 2nd, 3rd, etc. I'm using alternate picking, so up, down, when I'm playing these 3-note per string shapes like this, up, down, 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 up, down. What I want you to practice is with the Ionian shape, I want you to play a G major bar chord like this, and then practice Ionian mode. So you want to say that's the Ionian mode, it's in the key of G, it's bright and happy, all that stuff we discussed previously. Now what we're going to do is we're going to go to shape 2 or Dorian shape, and what we're going to do is we're not going to play G major. We could play G major like this, but if we did play the Dorian shape from the A, you're still playing G major, you're not playing A Dorian. So what we've got to do is, from the A, we've got to play, let's do an A minor 7 or A minor chord. And this is Dorian. We're going to play shape 2 or Dorian, 3-note per string shape. This is bluesy, this is mysterious, this is Dorian. Just doing some patterns there that make it sound a bit more interesting. But there is Dorian mode. Next up, we're going to go to the 3rd degree of G major. And we're going to play shape 3 or Phrygian. Let me quickly write these shapes underneath. Just I don't want to forget, because it is important to know that these are also just all shapes to play the major scale, but starting on all the different degrees. So you only see them as modes when you're targeting chords or you're playing from a certain note. Shape 4. And it makes sense, the shapes, in terms of that being the 5th mode, shape 5, shape 6. But the reason I want you to see them as modes as well as shapes is because you can use these in your playing to create cool lead lines and connect all of the major scale. You don't have to think modally. let's say you're playing over a G major chord, you don't always have to play shape 1. If you know shape 4 is from the C, you can play that over the major chord. It still works. You're not playing Lydian, but you're still starting from a different note. And it gives a different vibe even though you're playing off the 4th shape. If you played off shape 1, it just really implies Ionian. Whereas if you go from shape 2, it doesn't mean you're implying Dorian if you're playing over a G major chord. It just means you're playing shape 2. See, it always wants to resolve there. Now it's a different story if you're playing over a B, so a B minor, and then you took Phrygian shape, you'd be playing B Phrygian. And you can really hear that exotic sound. And once again, all you're playing is the notes of G major. So I could play shape 1 here. I've got the same kind of phrasing, it's the same notes, but for some reason it doesn't feel right. It's because it's not really targeting the right notes. You need that major second, you need that minor second in there, sorry. That gives it its flavour, essentially. But anyway, I'm going off a little bit of a tangent here. We know the 4th mode, which is off C, is going to be major, as we discovered from analysing the intervals. So if we played C major and played shape 4, we get our Lydian sound. It doesn't sound like G major, it sounds like Lydian, even though it's exactly the same notes as G major. That chord has changed its sound. Okay, number 5 is Mixolydian, and that's going to be from 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 from the D. So we want to play a D major or D dominant chord. Let's go D major. And if we played shape 5 or Mixolydian, it would sound like D Mixolydian. Now, if I played that same shape but had G major underneath, it wants to resolve to the G. It doesn't sound like Mixolydian. It needs to have the right notes underneath. We play D major. We've got that bluesy Mixolydian sound. It works. There it is. That is modes. So let's finish these 2 off. Hopefully you're getting the idea. We know over the 6th one is a minor chord, so that's going to be in the key of G, the 6th note, G, A, B, C, D, E. So E minor, and then play the 6th shape, which would be from the 12th fret. You can see it's dark, it's sad, it's mysterious. This is the same notes that we just played for Mixolydian and Lydian that were happy. How is it possible? It's the chord underneath. So we understand the harmonised scale, the notes it relates to. There we go. So the last and final one is going to be from the 7th note of G major. So G, A, B, C, D, E, F sharp. So we're going to do an F sharp diminished or F sharp minor 7 flat 5. Let's go for a minor 7 flat 5. And then we're going to play that 3-note per string Locrian shape. Okay, so there is our 7 3-note per string shapes. What I want you to do is learn all 7 shapes connecting, but see them first as just being the major scale. So for example, choose the key of G like we already did, but make sure you do change it to different keys. Let's do it in the key of G. We're going to have shape 1 is going to be from the root. You can practice it using legato like that, or do alternate picking, and you can try some different kind of sequences. Maybe do 1 string going up, skip a string, go back a string, skip a string, and so on. You can try going up 1 note after the other like this. So 1 note, then skip 1. So 1, 3, 2, 1, 3, 2, 1, 3, 2, 1, 3, 2. Etc, etc. If you want lots of ideas of how to write licks and things with the major scale and 3-note per string shapes, check out my book, The Ultimate Guitar Major Modes book. There's 70 licks in there to learn that will give you loads of inspiration. So we've done shape 1, and then we want to do shape 2. We don't want to see it as Dorian, we just want to see it as shape 2 at first, starting from the major 2nd or the 2nd note in the scale. So in the key of G, that would be A. And what you can do is to ensure that you're seeing it as still being G major, is find the root note. So in this position, we've got to go from the A, B, C, D, E, F sharp, and the G is on the D string. So you could play something like this. And then end on your G note, just to confirm in your head you're seeing this shape as G major, shape number 2. Then just do that same idea for all 7 shapes. And what you want to do next is try and work out some ideas to connect them. So maybe go up 2 strings of shape 1 like this, then shift position and then go up 2 strings of shape 2. And then go up to 2 strings with shape 3. Just work out different ideas to sequence them together. Maybe write some cool licks with them. Anything that gets you remembering the shapes. Now the second way I want you to practice these shapes is seeing them as modes. So you want to say out loud, the first shape is Ionian mode, or the major scale, and it has a major triad in there. It has a major 7 chord, a major 9. It's up to you how far you want to harmonize. Just knowing that it works over a major or minor chord or diminished chord is fine. And it's bright and happy sounding. Play the chord, G major, and then the 3-note per string shape. And then do that for all 7 of the modes. So Dorian, I'm playing A Dorian. It's bluesy, it's mysterious. Here we go. It's a minor triad, a minor 7 chord works. Here we go, it's shape 2. And that's 2 great ways to really get to know these 3-note per string shapes. I know that some players don't like to see these 3-note per string shapes as individual modes, and I kind of agree. That's why I'm saying, first of all, you want to see them as the 7 shapes of the major scale, just going off every degree. Because of course, think about this. Let's say you're playing over an A minor 7 chord like this. You can then grab your shape 2 Dorian scale and play that over the top with some kind of cool legato stuff. But you also know it's the 2nd shape, so that means you can still play shape 1 before, which is 2 frets down, as you would know from your practice. So you can have lots of fun with these shapes. The only issue is that you are thinking about the root notes always on the low E with this. That's the only issue. What I do recommend is that you try thinking actually. So this shape, let's say this G major shape, it actually works exactly the same way from the 10th fret. It's the same shape. And the only reason it changes is because when you get to the G and B strings and the B and E, it's because that's tuned in a different tuning and standard. So the shapes need to be moved up 1 fret that you're used to from down here. But anyway, there is a couple of ways to view your modes and scales using the 3 note per string idea. Now, hopefully those 2 different ways of looking at modes on single strings and using the 3 note per string system have completely cleared up how you visualize modes and see them. Now, I want to talk a little bit about playing non-diatonically. So far we've been playing a lot of stuff, apart from the blues stuff over the dominant chords, we've been playing it diatonically in terms of we've been playing over all the chords in the same key or within the major scale. Now let me give you an example of playing non-diatonically. Let's say you're in a band situation and you're just jamming over a 1 chord vamp. You've just got an A minor 7 going like this. That's all that's there. You have no other reference to work out if it's the 2 chord, if it's the 3 chord, which is usually minor, so you don't know if it's Dorian, if it's Phrygian, or it's Aeolian. You don't really know, but this is when it's great to understand modes. You can play all 3 of them over this 1 chord. If you know your 3 note per string shapes, you can just play those over this. So for example, we know that obviously Dorian works over minor chords, so we could use shape 2 of the 3 note per string and kind of synchronize that with different ideas. And that works. We know that Phrygian works over minor chords, so let's just play that. We're not thinking about the parent scale, we're thinking about the mode, and we know that Phrygian works over minor chords. To keep it simple, we can take the 3rd shape, the Phrygian shape of the 3 note per string shapes, and play that. And there we've got 2 different modes and flavors we can play over this minor chord. What else is there? We could take our Aeolian mode, which is the 6th mode of the major scale. We know that works over minor chords. So let's just mess around with shape 6 of the 3 note per string shapes. And then, of course, we know that the minor pentatonic works because it's part of the natural minor. It's derived from there. Now, come to think of it, when you think about all the intervals in a minor pentatonic scale, there's a root, minor 3rd, perfect 4th, perfect 5th, and then a minor 7th. Isn't that part of all the notes in Dorian? Yes. Isn't that part of all the notes in Phrygian? Yes. Is it part of all the notes in Aeolian? Yes. So what does that tell us? We can use the minor pentatonic shape 1, our favourite shape, as a base to play all the rest of these scales. We know this works. Now what you could do, you could start adding important notes from the 3 different modes. So with Dorian, the important note is the major 6th, which is here and here. So we can aim for those notes with our minor pentatonic. I'm still thinking minor pentatonic, but I'm just adding in that major sixth, which really gives a Dorian feel. Now, if we want to make it sound more like Aeolian or natural minor, we want to flatten that sixth. So we've got one here, and we've got one here. We want to aim for these notes. Then we've got a natural minor feel. Now, if we want to get a bit darker, a really key note for Phrygian is that flat 2. We've got one here and one here on the low E string. We've also got one here. We need to aim for these notes to really get the Phrygian feel with the minor pentatonic. Now, when I started to realize this, let me stop this. When I started to realize this, it completely blew my mind. So you can actually simplify all this stuff I've just said. And let me just say, I'm sorry, I had to explain all the previous stuff. But for the minor modes, you could just use the minor pentatonic as a base to then target the other important notes. So for Dorian, we want to target that major sixth. For Phrygian, we want to target that flat 2. And then for Aeolian, to get that sound, we want to target the flat 6. Simplifies everything, right? Now we can apply this similar idea to the other 3 major modes. So we've got Ionian, the first mode, which is major. And we've got Lydian, which is major, and mixed Lydian, which is major. We can take the major pentatonic, so shape 1 of that is like this. We've got a root, major second, major third, perfect fifth, and major sixth. And if you know that inside out, you can just add in certain intervals to get those 3 other flavors for Ionian, Lydian, and mixed Lydian. Because if we analyze all these notes, here's shape 1 in front of us, aren't all of these intervals in Ionian? Yes. All these intervals are in Lydian. Yes, there's nothing in the way there. All these intervals are in mixed Lydian. All we're missing, the important note for the major scale, I'd say, is maybe the perfect fourth. What else are we missing? And the major seventh in there. For mixed Lydian, all we need to add in is the minor seventh to get that flavour. And then for our Lydian, we just want to get that sharp 4 in there. So if we know where all our intervals are, we can search for them. So for example, with Lydian, we can just find that sharp 4, which is there and there. And all I'm visualizing is shape 1 of the major pentatonic. So what we could do, what's the other one? So the major scale, we can add in the perfect fourth, which is here or here. That was a very bad version, I'm sorry, but that's searching for the perfect fourth. I don't really play that because it's too happy. I prefer Lydian with that sharp 4. Really cool. And then finally, we've got mixed Lydian. We can just add in that flat 7, which is here or here. And then we can start soloing with that, and it completely simplifies everything. Now for the last mode, Locrian, it's a diminished sound, so we can't really use any of the pentatonic stuff, but we can actually, we could actually take the minor pentatonic, so we've got roots, minor third, perfect fourth, but we could lower all the fifths like this. And then we've got a hybrid diminished pentatonic, I suppose. But what you'll notice is there, I'm just playing that blues note in there. So with the minor pentatonic blues scale, it's like this. Anyway, I've gone off a bit of a tangent. So basically, there's 3 different ways you can visualize modes on the fretboard. The first way is over 1 string, playing up and down. Second way is kind of using adjacent strings over 1 octaves. The third way is the 3 note per string approach. And the fourth way, which I think is the best, that's why you've got to always wait to the end of my lessons, there's the gold nuggets, is just think about using your minor and major pentatonics and adding in those extra notes. So let's refresh. The extra note you want to add in for Ionian is either going to be targeting that perfect 4th or the major 7th. With your Dorian, you want to add in that major 6th to your minor pentatonic. For Phrygian, that flat 2 with your minor pentatonic. Lydian, with the major pentatonic, we want to be adding in that sharp 4. And then for mixed Lydian, we want to see the major pentatonic, but adding in that flat 7. And then for 6th mode Aeolian, we want to add in that flat 6 with our minor pentatonic. And then finally, for Locrian, we just want to alter our minor pentatonic slightly just by flattening that flat 5, getting that really cool scale we just found out, which I believe I just made up in the world. It probably exists as some name, but it's basically just part of the blues scale. And then I just played a minor 7 flat 5. Okay, so that's it for this lesson. A little bit of a plug, if you don't mind, at the end of this lesson. If you want to learn any more about the major scale and to write licks, check out my Ultimate Guitar Major Modes book. And then if you want to dive into melodic and harmonic minor and all of their modes, I've released 2 books in my Exotic Guitar Licks books. You can check those out. So that concludes this lesson. I hope you now understand what modes are and how to apply them on the guitar. It's so much fun. Make sure you download all of the PDFs and the exercises that come with this lesson and get practicing them. Also, make sure you just have some fun experimenting with the 7 different modes. The simplest way is, as I said, go on 1 string, then maybe shove on one of my drone tracks or drone chords and practice along and get used to the interval spacing, and then move on to doing it over 1 octave and then the 3 note per string shapes. But have fun, enjoy yourself, and really listen to the sounds of each of the modes. It takes months and even years for all this to soak in, so don't worry if you're completely new to it and don't get it at first. It took me a good couple of years to get this fluent at all of the different modes, and I tell you what, once you get used to the major scale and you delve into the world of melodic and harmonic minor, it will completely blow your mind and get you so excited to learn more and more and more. And you'll realize it's a lifetime of study, and that is not a bad thing. There's always new things to learn. Take care, guys. I'll hopefully see you in another lesson very soon.